Interesting book. I'd like to talk about, very briefly, the anonymous demonstration that occurred on the 5th of November, which traditionally is a great day of mayhem in Britain. Guy Fawkes Night, in fact. I'm no great fan of Anonymous. I don't really know much about them. I've read the comic book, as you can see, V for Vendetta. I've seen the film, which I didn't really think was all that good anyway, but I did see the film. But I've noticed that there's been a lot of these anonymous type demonstrations. Some of them, I don't know whether I agree with them or not, but others are quite good, like the ones outside the Scientology cult, which I think were very good. I think Scientology has to be exposed for what it is, an authoritarian cult. So there are positive things about Anonymous, but I don't really go online, so I don't know what the chit-chat is amongst anonymous people about whether they believe in conspiracy theories or anything like that. And they're not a political party, they're not really a cohesive group, they are just a group of discontented individuals, mostly kids that communicate over the internet, but occasionally turn up and do things. And this is what they did on the 5th of November. Now, I was there, so that you could call this a sort of eyewitness report of what I saw. I went along with a few friends. We didn't have any anonymous masks or anything like that, although some of the people we know that had kids, they all turned up with their anonymous masks. They're quite good, the anonymous masks, because really you just don't know who they are, so it does make you anonymous. So we went down to Trafalgar Square just as it was starting, and they marched down to Whitehall, pausing in front of 10 Downing Street, which I think was a bit of a waste of time because it allowed the police, who seem to have been caught on the hop, to throw up a cordon across the end of Whitehall. But in the end, everybody managed to get into Parliament Square and occupied the space outside Parliament Square, casting aside the barriers and so on, and was with a sound system and a bit of a party and a few fireworks going off. Obviously, the police had underestimated the amount of people that were coming. There was a few thousand, but there was definitely not enough police to control the situation if it got out of hand. But the crowd was not in a nasty mood. They weren't up for a violent physical confrontation with the police, which is fair enough. And if that's what they wanted, that was good enough with us. And it was a very party-like atmosphere. Most of the police stood in front of Parliament protecting it, and a few fireworks were thrown in front of Parliament, a few fireworks were let off. There wasn't enough police to kettle us all, which was good. But spontaneously, about 1,000 people started marching up towards St James's Park and up towards Buckingham Palace. The police were completely caught on the hop, and they were unable to follow in vehicles because people were throwing all the barriers that had been erected for the commemoration of the mass slaughter of World War I into the road, so the police vehicles were unable to follow, and the police on foot seemed to be very out of condition, and we marched or just walked towards Buckingham Palace, about 1,000 of us. But as I said, there was no serious violence of any kind. I didn't see anybody arrested. I didn't see the police actually attacking anybody, or neither did I see anybody attacking the police. We had just taken the streets, and it looked as though the police had cordoned off a bit of Buckingham Palace, and people just turned up into the Piccadilly area. Before we approached Piccadilly proper, we went past an area that was full of gentlemen's clubs and bespoke tailors to the gentlemen, full of flash shops and so on. Now, if it was an angry anarchist mob, there would have definitely been destruction. Crushed barriers would have been thrown through the windows. There would have been like black bloc type violence and so forth. And there was hardly any police there, so they couldn't have stopped it. But this never happened. There was a lot of shouting and so on, but there was no violence or anything like that. And the crowd carried on to Oxford Circus. It then carried on to Tottenham Court Road, where it was blocked by the police. And then it went via Soho Square, where there was no police. Now, throughout this time, there was a couple of rushes upon Topshop and McDonald's and so on. But again, there was no violence. There was no windows smashed. Nobody assaulted. There was no damage done or anything like that. It was just people out on the streets having a good time, dressed in their anonymous masks and so on. And by the time they got to Trafalgar Square, it kind of looked like it had petered out. We'd heard that there was people down at Buckingham Palace and there were still people down at Parliament Square. But, you know, it was a cold night. We'd made our point. Nobody had been arrested. So it was kind of like what you might call a 1-0 in a friendly. It didn't really amount to too much, but it was okay. Later on in the news and the next day, we learned that 15 people had in fact been arrested, mostly at Buckingham Palace, and in fact that fireworks had been fired into Buckingham Palace. Rockets and so on, like, you know, and apparently the Queen was there having a conference with the leader of South Korea, so it must have been a nice surprise for her to see that not all of her subjects are in fact grovelling idiots waving Union Jacks. I think about 15 people were arrested, which is 15 people too many as far as I'm concerned. But considering that we took the streets, considering that the police could have arrested a lot of us if there had been a lot of police, and they could have been really violent with us, which would have provoked more violence. And I think that it was a fairly good night out. And it was nothing to do with the left. I do believe the left were there having some protest on Westminster Bridge, burning a few electricity bills and so on, which of course they've got every intention of paying. It's not like Yanks burning their draft cars during the Vietnam War, is it? So I've never been on an anonymous thing before, and I don't think I will ever again, although I might, you know. But it had a good feeling, it had a good spirit to it, and it was great to see sort of loads of kids out and everything, and they were all in a good mood, and they weren't particularly nasty. So I'd say that, yeah, it was a success, and I say well done to the kids. Because after all, a lot of those kids that are on the march will be there on the streets in the future, and they won't be wearing anonymous masks. They'll be there probably in their tens of thousands and their hundreds of thousands when eventually, if the revolution ever begins here. So yeah, full marks to the kids. As I say, I don't know much about the autonomous movement, the anonymous movement, but well done anyway to everybody that took place. And not every confrontation, not every manifestation on the streets has to be violent to be successful. This is not to make a fetish of violence or non-violence or anything like that, but I would just say that it was successful, and once again I think it was a bloody good night out. Okay.